welcome back. It was a great weekend for Arsenal and for Spurs. So who is the happier of the two sets of fans at the moment? No, you're the happiest one in the studio. So you're delighted with what you've seen. Early days, obviously, the qualifier comes in, but you're delighted.
The thing is that you're happy because you always want to start the season well. You just want to start the season well, but you do judge it off of how the pre-season's going. You have to judge all games because the balance and, again, Arsenal done their business very early. They know exactly what they wanted. So they've got them into the pre-season training camp. Everybody knows exactly what they're doing and there's been balance. Of course, there have been good like results in there as well. But the main thing you're looking for is that there's a balance from back to front. And then what we saw in that game against Palace, especially the first half, first 20 minutes, was a real good balance and intensity with what Zinchenko brings, what Jesus brings, the actual levels that they've risen in the tech. This was a very, very well worked free kick as well, which Arsenal scored with. But the only worry was, I think that they kind of...
Mikel Arteta talked about it afterwards.
What did he say?
He was asked, was it you? Was it when your coaching staff? And he went, yeah, it was the set piece coach. And they said nothing else. Giving nothing away.
Didn't give nothing. But the thing is that, yes, so you've got all that going on, but what you saw was there was a little tendency in that game where Arsenal done what they done last season, where they kind of, instead of going for the throat and finishing them off, which they could have done, they kind of stepped back and gave Palace the initiative to get back in it. In the end, Palace, unfortunately, missed for them. They missed some really good chances. Arsenal won the game. But I'm happy because the confidence, what they've had through the pre-season's gone into that first game. They've won the first game, that will just continue. Now, hopefully, the confidence.
What's been really interesting, bringing in Jesus and Zinchenko particularly, has been that they've matched that Arsenal profile of being young players with a long career ahead of them, but they already have success. They've got 4 Premier League title winners' medals each. And so, despite the fact they're young, they bring experience, they bring Champions League experience, they bring big match, big occasion experience.
Well, they bring that winning mentality as well, of how, and standards is another thing as well, because when you get someone of that quality, them two players walking into a dressing room and how they kind of apply themselves on the pitch, how they prepare for games, how they prepare for training. Arsenal have got, as you said, there are a lot of young players in that dressing room. So when you see these guys coming who are born winners, that's going to rub off on the players, and you could see there, even in the early stages of pre-season and against Crystal Palace, the influence that they've got, even the way that Gabriel Jesus was commanding the ball, Zinchenko on the ball, talking to some of the younger players, talking to Saka, even Odegaard, who's the captain, he's there talking to Gabriel Jesus. So I think they're the 2 perfect signings for Arsenal. They're what they needed. And they're players that wanted to come to Arsenal. I think that's always key. Yeah. Like you look at transfers throughout other teams, you worry about, do they really want to be an Arsenal player? You could quite clearly see in their performances and their attitude, and when you hear them speak, the likes of Gabriel Jesus and Zinchenko, they wanted to be Arsenal players, and I think for Mikel Arteta, that's perfect.
Well, Zinchenko said he was an Arsenal supporter as a kid. Not coughing because I don't believe it. Even though you do hear it a lot, but he seemed very sincere about all of that.
Zinchenko's
Sorry about this.
at home, he's like, I'm listening.
But Gabriel Jesus is... again, looks like a player who's wanted.
Well, do you know, I probably won't answer this because you've got a good story to tell about being wanted, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I said Gabriel Jesus looks like he's wanted by Arsenal, but I had the same conversation just after the previous season has finished. Steve Bruce phones me and says, will you come and play for Sunderland? I want you to be my number 9.
Right.
I was like, 100%. I didn't want to go anywhere else, because I felt like he really wanted me.
Yes.
And when you look at Gabriel Jesus' performances, it looks like, well, Arteta's had the same conversation with him.
Yeah.
I want you to be my focal point of this team. You're going to lead this team. And he's taken it on his shoulders and gone, I want part of this, which is probably why he was linked to Chelsea's and other clubs, but it looked like he was only destined to go to Arsenal because he wanted to go.
I'll tell you something important about that. I was in Florida where Arsenal played Chelsea, and the guys, I'd been following Chelsea, and the guys who had been following Arsenal in their preceding games came and joined us, and we all were watching game and exchanging notes ahead. And the guys who had been following Arsenal said, watch Jesus, he's going to be outstanding. He'd already scored goals for fun in his previous few games, and in the match itself he was exceptional, not just in the movement in the final third, but in terms of his willingness to track back, his distribution. He was just out of this world. And He'd scored, I think, in total 7 goals in pre-season, and you could tell straight away that he was going to be ready for a run for his life. I've got a word for Saliba as well, just very quickly, because again, there was a little Mexican wave of eyebrows in the press box when he started.
That's a lovely image.
I was just saying,
Who started it?
It wasn't me. but because he just didn't make a mistake in the match. And the significance of the win is that afterwards, we thought Chelsea were in good shape. And afterwards, Thomas Tuchel, in the press conference in Florida, he was saying how angry he was that his players couldn't lay a glove. It was 4-0 in the end. And he said, you know, it was angry at the application, the movement, everything about his team's performance. But actually, all we could talk about was Arsenal, because they were grinning like, you know, Arteta was grinning like a Cheshire cat. He knew what he had, and actually tried to dampen down expectation, because now there is huge expectation around Arsenal this season.
Yeah, there's going to be huge expectation around Arsenal. But even before the season started, there was huge expectation around Tottenham because of Conte, because of the summer that they've had. And they started, all right, Southampton did not play well in that game, but to start on the opening day with a 4-1 win, you know, having gone behind early on in the game, it's not bad, is it, for Tottenham? It's not a bad start.
Last season, I'd been raving about Conte. I was talking about the impact he had at all of his previous clubs, and I just knew if really the decision for Spurs was to decide what kind of club they wanted to be. And if they wanted to be a serious club, if they had let him go get the slip through their fingers, they could never claim to be ambitious ever again, because this guy wins things if you give him the backing. And what they did is very unusual for them. They released £150 million, which I've never seen in all the years I've covered Spurs, see Daniel Lee with the chairman do that for any other manager, including Pochettino. But as far as Conte was concerned, he realised what he had. And when you look at the team now and the squad, I was at the fixture Spurs Southampton last season. Spurs went ahead, Southampton came back to win. Spurs were a mess. Conte was frustrated. This time around, 4 goals, Son and Kane, neither of them scored. The 2 wing-backs look like, well, certainly Sessegnon looks like a different player. He'll score goals for fun this season, and all of the 6 new signings started the match on the bench. It's going to be an exciting season.
I think that with those fullbacks, because I was quite pleased with Sessegnon. He himself said in his interview he needs to score more, he needs to do more, and he knows that because Perisic is there now, talking about a lot of experience, you know, a winning mentality. You know, so you're feeling like the way they play. Especially, you want to see how Basuma does, because everything's the wings. It's the wings with them and the fullbacks, and then they're getting the ball into the box. And they've got so many players now who can, you know what I mean, who can finish and score now. So I have to say with Spurs, what was quite impressive is the way, like we said, Darren, in the way they've done the business very early. Something's changed at Spurs. It's not how it was before. You know, with this manager, He's got the players he wants. They know how they're going to play. I'm still surprised I'm not seeing somebody in their midfield who's a bit more creative.
You're going to buy one more.
Yeah, because you feel like if people start to recognise and shut down the wing backs, and that you're going to stop a lot of what Tottenham do. But other than that, try doing it.
Is that what they're looking for in the market?
They're looking at Zaniolo at Real Madrid, at Roma. He's 23 and he can play on the wing, but he can play centrally as well. They did want to sign Christian Eriksen, but he was determined to go to Man United because he just wanted to have that move. But the question I was going to ask the chaps is that if you're Kane, do you still expect to see him outside the box, or do you expect him to see him more inside the box, particularly given the impact that Haaland has had, and now that this race for the Golden Boot is going to intensify?
You know what? Go on, D.
No, I think he'll play the exact same way as he does. I don't think he'll kind of limit himself to just staying in the box, because he's such a good player. I think he's got more to his game than Haaland has. I mean, Haaland's a goal scorer, but Kane can score the goals. He can link play. I mean, his range of passing.
Depends on how hungry he is, though, D, in respects of wanting to score. Though.
Yeah, but you think even with Kane, though, even as hungry as he is, I still don't think he'll detract from what he usually does. He's been scoring like 25 goals per season, playing the exact same way, not limiting himself to just getting in the box. So,
do you think? I know it's the first game of the season. He doesn't really do well in August, but the fact is, do you think he'll have left that game 4-1 and Harry Kane not being on the score sheet, and he's happy with that.
No, he'd be fuming.
He'd be fuming.
Well, I saw the last goal. When the last goal went in, you should have seen Son's face.
Yeah, but,
Son's
no,
face
but there was one
like-
where I tell you what, Sonny's got he's already got golden boot-itis because I saw him come across. Harry Kane was free. Didn't even look at him.
No.
And Harry Kane went, Sonny. You know, so I'm going to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
But the thing with Harry Kane, I'm going to go with Benty there. I don't think he changes how he plays because I think they've got goals from other places. But at some stage, Harry Kane's going to start feeling like, I don't want to be not close in this golden boot race. But it depends on how well Tottenham are doing, because if they're doing well and he doesn't have to be mainly being the main goal scorer, but they're right amongst it and he chips in, he'll be happy with that as well, because remember, he's desperate to win something.
But we've talked lots about strikers, which means that we don't have much time to talk about Kulusevski, but we will. I mean, at some stage this season, there's going to be plenty of opportunity to talk about him, particularly after that fantastic performance on the opening day. Before we go, though, it is the 30th anniversary of the Premier League next week, and as we said, we're going to bring you a special show talking about the greatest moments and the greatest players. You won't be here for this one. You will, so you keep your powder dry. Don't go too early on it. Darren, what's yours?
My
What's
favourite
the standout moment?
For me, being an Arsenal fan, it's got to be 03-04 season, Invincibles. I mean, going a whole season without getting beat is still something. People try and kind of mock it because of the points tally and that, but to go a whole season with some of the great sides we've seen now, like Cities and Liverpools, that have been beat, for Arsenal to go that whole season, for me, that's the moment, 03-04, Invincibles.
Darren, what about you?
I did think about Rooney scoring against Arsenal as a young teenager, but I'm going to go with Dennis Bergkamp's hat-trick against Leicester.
Wow.
Just absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
And there have been so many fantastic players over the years as well. It's always easy to remember the great forwards. And given that we've been talking about strikers as a little thread all the way through this programme, who's the player, do you think, that stands out for you amongst all of them over the last 30 years? It doesn't need to be who's your favourite player of the last 30 years, but just who, when I mention that to you, who's the first player that comes to mind?
Cantona.
Thierry Henry.
You. No, I'm serious. I mean, you've transcended different generations. You know, you've been. Obviously, there'll be other stuff, but you know, you talk about stuff in football, outside of football. You can, you know, strikers come through the ranks and look up to you now.
I did.
Yeah, there you go. You see.
See, that's quite nice. Alan Shearer's in next week and Sean, so they won't probably be as nice. It's quite nice to get all the praise for right the other way in this one. But look, there's so much to look back on over the last 30 years, and we'll be doing that in more detail when we come back with you next week. But this time around, it's been a fantastic start to this Premier League season already. It could, but before the way we've talked about it, it feels like there's going to be a different pattern emerging in the way that games are played. And it looks, you know, it's easier after this weekend to go, Manchester City, they look like they're going to run away with it again, and they might. But there's always plenty of twists and turns we get between then. Thank you so much for being with us for this very first Kelly and Wrighty of the brand new season. We'll be back, as I say, same time next week when we'll be looking back on 30 years of the Premier League.